So I'm going to teach you today about Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory. It's actually a really cool theory that explains that a child, like when they're born, there's a lot of things that impact how they're going to turn out, how they're going to grow, how successful they will be. And before this theory, a lot of people thought it was just genetics. But Bronfenbrenner's theory did a really good job of showing Congress at the time, but really humans in general, that a lot of other factors go into how a child turns out. And many of those factors are not even in the child's control or even in their parents' control. So we're going to watch this theory or talk about this theory today, because it's really interesting. And then you're going to apply it to the person that you have been creating throughout this unit. So in your notes, you should see the new handout looks like this. There are 4 pages to it. If you have the one that has the big blue circles on it, then you have the correct one. All right, so we're going to watch this quick video that explains the theory, and then you are going to apply it to yourself. So you don't need to write anything yet. I just want you to listen and learn about the theory, and then I'll tell you what to do next.
In 1964, a young psychologist appeared before the U.S. Congress with a mission. It was a time when most people thought that the reason poor people stayed poor was a matter of biology and had nothing to do with the environment they grew up in. The psychologist, Yuri Bronfenbrenner, wanted to change that and convince the world that to help those less fortunate, we also needed to change their surroundings. But did he succeed? Bronfenbrenner's ecological system theory conceives that a child is influenced by 5 ecological forces. First comes the microsystem of family and friends that affect the child directly. Second are the forces of the connections between the people around the child, parents with teachers and teachers with peers. Then there are links between social settings that do not directly involve the child, such as the father with his boss, the peers with their parents, and the teacher with the principal. Next is the overarching culture, religion, and social norms that influences all others. And lastly, there is time, which changes everything over the course of one's life. Children are born into a microsystem that influences the child's experiences directly. Children from unfortunate backgrounds are more likely to experience problematic family structures, even if it's simply for the fact that parenting is more difficult if you are poor. They also encounter more negative situations at school or bad influences through friends. Consequently, a child that grows up in a negative microsystem will find it hard to succeed. The mesosystem represents the interconnections between the elements that surround the child. For example, the relationship between the father and the school teachers. If the father doesn't get along with a teacher, the child might suffer. The exosystem involves the links between social settings that do not involve the child. For example, a child's experience at home can be influenced by their parents' experiences at work. If the mother loses her job, there might be more arguments with the father, resulting in changes in their interaction with the child. The macrosystem describes the overarching culture that influences all other systems, such as a child's geographic location and ethnicity. Intelligent people who happen to live in bad places are more likely to move to better ones, but that also means that they are more likely to be strangers in a richer society. So, regardless of the child's biological potential or upbringing, on a macro level, he or she may still be at a disadvantage. The chronosystem refers to changes in the child and the environment over time. As the child grows up, the parents may stop loving each other and divorce, which can be traumatic for an 8-year-old boy. 5 years later, he may have come to terms with how things turned out. But when the boy turns 16, his mom's new boyfriend moves into their tiny apartment, and things get difficult again. Bronfenbrenner, who was influenced by Lev Vygotsky and Kurt Lewin, convinced the U.S. Congress that a child's prospect is not genetically predestined, but is the result of the larger environment they happen to be placed in. Children who grow up in unfortunate social structures, therefore, need a form of support that not only reaches their families, but also elements of their community. Bronfenbrenner's theory helped form the Head Start program in 1965, a government program that has served more than 35 million poor children since. Decades later, Bronfenbrenner and Stephen Sessi proposed an extension of this theory, called the bioecological model. This new model recognizes gene-environment interactions and acknowledges the role of heritability, but adds that genes themselves are under the influence of the environment. In other words, the process of heritability varies in a magnitude of potentials. How much a child can make of the potential they inherit depends on the ecological environment. Bronfenbrenner made a critical contribution to our realization that parent-child relationships do not exist in a social vacuum, but are embedded in the larger structures such as community, society, and culture. In order to develop well, he allegedly said, every child needs at least one adult who is irrationally crazy about him or her. Now it's your turn. Make 5 circles, draw yourself in the center, and add a timeline at the bottom. Then put all the people, institutions, and forces that affect you through the 5 different systems. On the timeline below, you can add some major events from the past and those you expect in the future. Can you tell how the 5 forces are shaping your life? To read more about the topic or download the...
Okay, so we're going to try this.
In
your handout, you should see this blue chart. I'm going to leave this up here just in case you need a reminder, but this is also in your note handout to give you some examples of some of the things that are going to fall into these different systems. So I want you to think about your life and the people that surround you and the systems that you're in, the belief systems, the policies in your school, in your culture, in your community. And I want you to see how they apply to you. All right, so we're going to take about 4 or 5 minutes before we get started with the person you created to kind of think about your own system, ecological system, and how it impacts you. I'm not going to ask you to share these. This is more for you to kind of apply the theory to yourself. So take a few minutes and see if you can come up with some ideas of things around you that would fit into these 5 systems. When you're doing this, for instance, in the middle, I want you to put specific examples. So like, let's say it says teachers. I want you to put like maybe the name of a teacher who you think specifically may have influenced your microsystem. Maybe for exosystem, if we're talking about social media, maybe put like what social media you use that could influence you in either a good or a bad way. It's not necessarily just good influences. It can be either. All right? About 2 more minutes. All right, you guys are going to chat about the microsystem. I want you to come up with one example that would fit in the microsystem, all right? You guys are going to be doing the exosystem, one example. You guys in the back, you're going to be doing the exosystem. You guys will have the macrosystem, one example, and then you guys will come up with an example of the chronosystem that you want to share. It can be anything at all that you came up with. Micro, meso, exo. Yeah, you're a macro. Wow, that's my sister Jenny.
Well, yeah.
Do you guys have that? Yes.
Kind of similar.
He picks up people that he hates. Like he generates.
All right, let's go over these. So microsystem, can you guys think of an example that would relate to a person's microsystem? What'd you guys come up with?
Someone's dad.
Yeah, this is easy, right? Someone's dad, someone's parents, their teacher, their coach, anybody that directly influences their day-to-day life, okay? These are microsystems. They directly influence the person who is in the system, the person's system, okay? All right, the mesosystem. What'd you guys come up with? These are connections between microsystems.
It's like how your parents and the teachers they get along.
Good. Do your parents and your teachers get along? How many of you play a sport? All right. Do your parents go to the games and scream at the coach? Or is your parent a helper to the coach? Or does your parent not interact at all with the coach? These are all things in our mesosystem. All right. Mrs. Walden and I just had parent-teacher conferences last night. We always say every year, a lot of the parents that come, their students are getting A+. But guess what? That's probably why. Like that's a positive influence on the mesosystem. So we welcome those parents that come with and their kids have great grades because that's likely the reason why that interaction with that mesosystem has helped that child be successful. Okay? The exosystem, what'd you guys get?
We said like friends' parents.
Okay. What about them? You're right, but what about your friends' parents?
Like if they were to, I guess, like ground a friend or like make them upset in some way, that may come back on you when they interact with you.
Perfect. Yeah, great. What's another one? What about with your parents? What's something that could impact your parents that could indirectly impact the child?
Their job.
Yeah, their jobs. How many of your parents are visibly stressed after work? Like, you know your parents have stress at work. No, just, okay, yeah, a lot of us, right? So a lot of times, those are the types of things in our exosystem that the child can't control, right? The child has no impact on, but those things can influence if the parent loses a job, if the parent has a healthy job. Mrs. Waller and I always say this job is like a really great job for a parent, but also this building, because there's not a lot of drama or stress that we bring home, which can help the exosystem of not just our kids, but our family. All right, macro system. Is that you guys? What do you guys get for the macro system?
Like someone's presidency, like politics.
Okay, politics for sure. All right, a lot of people these days especially are feeling a little bit of some kind of way about politics. Maybe they're like super happy about it. Maybe they're like not happy at all. But the macro system are those cultural impacts, those societal impacts, the law, the president. These are the types of things, these public policies that could influence the way that we live our lives. What about chronosystem? What you guys get?
Moving from one place to another.
Okay, moving. Has anyone ever moved? Yes. Moving, right? If you think about your parents saying, when I was a kid, like they're referencing their chronosystem. I told you the other day that there was no internet when I was a kid and there were no cell phones. Like that is my chronosystem. Over time, those events have impacted like who I am and what I believe is important. All right. So we really like this theory. Here's the thing. A lot of the things that we mentioned are not in your control. Your parents' job, not in your control. The state of the world is a lot of times not in your control. But the good thing is they added in this other system, the bioecological system, if you remember at the end of the video, nature and nurture. All right. Some of these things are not in your control, but some are. All right. So when you think about this in terms of your life, like we've been doing this activity where you roll the dice and like, oh, maybe I get a good parent and maybe I don't. Maybe I have a great temperament. Maybe I don't. That's true in life. But what is also true is even though we're dealt certain things, let's say we have a horrible microsystem and we don't have people around us who support us. A lot of times people can pull through these situations depending on their nature, or more importantly, humanistic theory says, depending on the choices that we've made. So we've seen people throughout history have terrible life circumstances, terrible systems, and still be successful. So please do not look at your system and be like, oh my gosh, all these bad things have happened to me. I'm surrounded by awful people. I'm destined to be terrible. That is not true. That is not what the theory meant to teach people. What it meant is systemically, it's harder for some people when these negative things happen to them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is not possible for a person to be successful. Merely that environment matters, and when environment is negative, a lot of times it can lead to negative outcomes. Okay, so we're going to now apply this to the people that we have created. So this is our last dice rolling. I'm going to go get them here in a second. I want to explain to you what you're doing first. Take a look up here. So you're going to first roll the die, and you're going to decide based on the roll that you get, the different systems that your hypothetical person you've been creating is going to be raised in. So for instance, let's say I roll a 1 or 2 for their microsystem. That means they have strong relationships and a loving family, like a great start. A 3 or 4 means they have one strained relationship. A 5 or 6 means their home life is unstable. You're going to do that for each of the systems. And then, here's a big one. Still looking up here? Because you're going to be confused if you're not. You're going to scroll back to this Erickson, and this isn't a picture of it, but a couple pages up, you rolled the dice when you decided if your person passed or failed each Erickson stage. So you're going to go back up and highlight what your person did in each of the stages. All right, we've already rolled that. Then you're going to compare. So for instance, let's say in stage 1, I rolled in my person passed trust versus mistrust. But when I rolled for their microsystem, they got a 3 and they have one strained relationship. So I'm going to try to explain that. I'm going to say, well, they had a strained relationship, but they still had enough good relationships in their life to pass with trust. Or let's say they passed with trust, but they had an unstable home life. Like, how is that possible? Well, maybe the person's nature was very strong and they were hard, like strong-willed, and they pushed through it. So these are all explanations that we could give. So we want you to look, does your person's Bronfenbrenner stage compare compatibly with Erickson? Are they incompatible? And if they are incompatible, what could be an explanation for that? Okay? Then the last thing we're going to ask you to do, I want you to, obviously this whole time we've been rolling the dice to see like what happened to your person. I want you to come up with a hypothetical. All right. If you could give your person a different reality with a roll of a die, what would you have changed? Then there are some reflection questions for this whole dice rolling activity. So for instance, which development system seemed to have the biggest impact on your person? Any roll of your dice surprise you? What would you have re-rolled? What one system where you're like, oh gosh, they failed that system. I wish I could have redone that. All right. Which one and why? And how much personal choice plays a role in how the person develops. And then I want you to compare your personal life to the person that you've created or another group member and see if you can find similarities. All right. You're going to have the rest of the period. It shouldn't take you that long to get through this. You can work together. Obviously, your roles will be separate, but the reflection questions you can definitely discuss with your peers.